अर्थात कृष्ण जी रणभूमि में कहते हैं, या तो युद्ध में मारा जाकर स्वर्ग को प्राप्त होगा अथवा संग्राम में जीतकर पृथ्वी का राज्य भोगेगा। इस कारण हे अर्जुन, तो युद्ध के लिए निश्चय करके खड़ा हो जा। श्रीमद् भगवद गीता अध्याय 2 श्लोक 27। Good evening to one and all present here. Namaste. I am Rohini Karya. I welcome you all in today's Manthan Unplugged session. Manthan derives its name from Samudra Manthan. Manthan is a kriya of churning young minds and bringing out their thoughts towards the topic of national interest. Manthan has been honored with the presence of speakers like Vikram Samant, J. Sai Dikhar, K. Mohammed, Monica Arora, Anand Raghunathan, Sushil Pandit, and the list goes on. Today we have with us a speaker who hails from Udupi, Karnataka, heartland of Hindu civilization as she likes to quote it, Rashmi Samant ji. Rashmi ji went on to achieving a milestone by becoming first Bharatiya Hindu president of Oxford University's Student Association with a landslide victory, but soon she was forced to step down from her earned post because of some wrongful allegations. On 5th August, she took to Twitter to announce her upcoming book on a young Hindu girl from Udupi to Oxford and beyond, A Hindu in Oxford. Today, Rashmi ji is here with us to share her experience and talk about her book. I request Satish ji Sada to kindly escort Rashmi ji on the desk and welcome her on behalf of Manthan. On the desk and address the forum. Meanwhile, I also request everyone to please keep their mobile phones on silent. Also, the session will be followed with question answer session. So I request everyone to keep their questions for Rashmi ji ready. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Nagpur, and it's wonderful to be a part of this congregation here in Nagpur. It's my very first time here in town, and ever since I landed at 7 a.m. this morning, the hospitality, the experience, it's been endless. So I must say you have something very unique going on here. On that note, thank you so much for being here. I truly believe that time is the most expensive gift that you can give to someone, and you've all decided to spend some of your time here, and I can only be grateful to something I cannot repay. On that note, what is this book all about? I think there are 2 books put up here, and the very title, A Hindu in Oxford. It starts, I think, with describing the book in a line. If I were to put it together like that, I would put it together as the chronicles of just, a 21-year-old, of some stories of faith, endurance, of battles won and lost. So it's just a collection of what I went through as a 21-year-old. If I were to start what I went through, I come from a very small town on the coastal belt of Karnataka called Udupi. So that's where everything began. Born there, raised there, surrounded by endless altruism. Altruism is this Western word that's been co-opted right now and splashed around as, selfless service, but it is something that's been ongoing in the temple town of Udupi for the past 1,000 years. I I say this because if you walk 5 meters in that town, you can find Anna Seva happening there for the past 1,000 years. Every temple there, separated by just 5 meters of distance, would have this going on. And what is a bigger selfless service than, free food that you give out to society? And this is the sort of upbringing I've had, born and raised in the temple town, surrounded by the true blue values of the Hindu Dharma. I think very often we mistake the beauty, the stillness of a small town to small dreams, to small achievements, and we dumb down everything that a small town or people from small towns are capable of. Maybe Nagpurians can relate, maybe not, I don't know, maybe I'll hear from you after this. But that was the case for me at least. It's always mistaken that people from small towns, okay, they have smaller imagination, smaller goals. But I believe otherwise. I believe that the unfiltered skies that we have there give us an endless canvas to sort of paint a story of endless possibilities, to, vie for things that are only imaginary to us, to have that sense of reckless optimism about the world, and to have that sense within us to go out and achieve. I found it within myself. Maybe it's because of the decolonized upbringing that I've had, where my parents told me that only you decide what you can't do. When the day you tell yourself that there's something you cannot do, that's the day you lose. That's the day you lose out on an achievement which is yet to happen. So only if you discount yourself does the world discount you. And with that, sort of reckless optimism, I applied to the University of Oxford. And mind me, I applied without having a single Oxford graduate even in my close circles, distant family, close family, whatsoever. Every time we fill up a form, we go to the nearby uncle saying, "Arey uncle, मैंने form ठीक से तो भरा है." So we do have that tendency, right, to reach out to familiar surroundings, to only hope for things that somebody within our own circles have, and to reiterate if we are doing it right. And finally, I had no uncle, no auntie, no didi, or no bhaiya to show my application to and find out if I'm even doing the right thing, and whether I'm even filling the application right or I have it all wrong. So I think it's just been a lot of reckless optimism, a lot of possibilities of limitless, endless possibilities that a small town gives you that ultimately pushed me to even apply for the university in the first place. The whole bogeyman around it being ranked #1 in the world soon fell away when I got in. I was absolutely happy, like any student would be, because okay, this university is ranked 1 out there in the world. There's so much celebration, jubilance around this university. I've made it there. Okay, I've made it in life. That was a sort of mentality with which I went there. And that's pretty much the initial 1 month, 2 months of me being on campus. Just the plain exuberance of being there, of having made it there, and just the genuine happiness of being there. So it was all hunky-dory, everything looked great. Oxford is called the city of dreaming spires. The spires were even taller for me than they were in reality because of the happiness I had of just getting there. As much as I'd like to think of myself as a child with a very rooted upbringing that's been mostly decolonized, I've also been a product of the Macaulay education system. So it's been easy for me to believe that the constructs which we are taught about universities which are supposed to be ranked 1, about universities which are setting narratives out there in the world, is to be taken for face value. So I was still in that confused state. You can't blame a 21-year-old. Come on. But I think for me, the awakening started when this whole shine of being there started to go away. It wasn't long before that started to dumb down, and the shine started to move off, and then I could start seeing the university for what it really was. One of the major points of reckoning for me was to pass by a corridor on the way to the library. I was finally able to see beyond the farce, the dreams and the spires. And then it started this whole conversation, this whole, internal debate about where I was, what was the history here, why, it is number one, and what is the history of this place really. I took the Uncomfortable Oxford tour, so it was this tour being organized by some rowdy students, they were called Rowdy, and they would, tell everybody about the uncomfortable aspects of the University of Oxford, what is not great here, and okay, there is something negative about this place, all the secrets and the, spilling the beans basically. And I was a part of that, and then I started seeing beyond what was a carefully curated reality for all of us as students there. A professor at the University of Oxford had actually called the university the citadel of colonization. The university used to train generals who would go on, carry out loot, who would subjugate indigenous people, who would, carry out gross human rights violations all across the world, amass great wealth, and then, reach a point in life where they didn't know what to do with that wealth and wanted it somehow turn to legacy. Just because they had so much money, they believed that they needed to be remembered for the rest of the time. And they would then end up donating it to the University of Oxford and setting up different scholarships, which would then go on to also whitewash what they did to begin with. So it was a very vicious cycle, it was a university that's producing generals and colonizers, which is just going out there, carrying out this endless cycle of loot, and then pumping the money back in here to actually whitewash their deeds. So it was some kind of a mechanism that was out there to justify colonization in some way, to justify loot in some way, and to justify the supreme position that the Westerners had taken then and retained so far in the global market spaces as a result of this kind of an attitude towards indigenous people, towards people that were citizens of their former colonies. And that started becoming very concerning for me. As a person and a person with certain, characteristics, I've always been the one to go out there and, talk when I thought something was not right. I still remember when I was in kindergarten and they wanted to pick a class monitor, I would be the first person to say, okay, I'm going to be the class leader. So I've always loved taking initiatives, loved putting myself out there, loved speaking when nobody else wanted to, and break that discomfort. I think it's something that came to me as a characteristic rather. And because I had that, and I was seeing this at Oxford, I thought, okay, hey, let's do something about it. What do we do about this? We need to be a part of the system. We need to be in a position where we can demand a change in the core philosophy of how we do things. Because I could still, hear the language of the people. It went beyond symbolism. It went beyond putting up a few sculptures in the corridors and putting up a few idols of colonizers in certain corners of the libraries. It actively went into the syllabus and the language that the people spoke there. I distinctly remember one person walking up to me and saying, hey, wasn't colonization a positive experience for your ancestors because it civilized them? And this was, trust me, mind me, the top 0.1 so-called % of the brains of the world talking, because that's what University of Oxford students are supposed to be, the cream of the cream. And if this was the sort of philosophy that's going around, and this is the sort of sentiment that is being retained, then God help history, and God help how our market spaces are placed, and God help how the future of these discourses are going to shape up like. So I thought, okay, we need to do something actively because it goes beyond symbolism, it goes beyond icons, and it goes beyond statues. And based on that, I ran a platform of decolonization. And I think it was a great lesson on the power of the silent majority, because the silent majority really rallied to my case. As the home to over 150 different nationalities, we had students from Africa, we had students from South America, who have generationally faced similar things as we have, and they really resonated with what I was saying. Rather, they didn't want to be vocal about it, but they were finally happy there was somebody raising the same points that they wanted to, and they felt intrinsically about the whole issue. It turned out to be a landslide election. one of the biggest elections ever with the highest voter turnouts. The victory margin was phenomenal. 54% of the votes were in my favor, despite there being 6 other candidates. And I was declared the first Indian Bharatiya woman president of the prestigious Oxford University Students' Union. And now comes the question, right? What really went wrong? Because we all know of little maybe bits and pieces of what went wrong, or maybe not. But what really went wrong? Here on one side, there was so much celebration, there was so much jubilation. All newspapers in India carrying it around as some kind of a diplomatic victory. Even the British High Commissioner to Bharat tweets, living bridge between India and the UK. So it was being celebrated. It was being owned up that, okay, we are beginning to heal as 2 different civilizations who were at different ends a few hundred years ago. So all of these things were happening, but simultaneously, I started to get a lot of hate emails, which were calling me, okay, your face, resembles a black horse and stuff like that. A lot of really racist, really mean comments from anonymous handles. And I thought, okay, sour grapes, every victory comes with a little bit of, sour people. Let's just ignore it and let's just focus on the positives and let's go out, let's achieve everything we set out to begin with. And the victory was also something unexpected because when I initially ran, the whole idea was to raise the platform of decolonization through my campaign. I really didn't have any high hopes of winning because I'd just been on campus for 3 months. Other candidates were there for 3-4 years before me. They were all, PhD candidates and undergrads who were there for long. I was just a master's student who had just gotten on campus, freshly minted from her undergrad days in Bharat. And I didn't have much friends as well because it was a COVID year and we didn't socialize as much as we did previously. There was a running joke that, okay, Rashmi is going to end up with only 2 votes. One that she gives herself and one is going to be the lucky charm that she's going to hold on to in this whole election. But I proved them otherwise. So it was a very different situation. Even winning felt surreal. It felt as surreal as even getting into the university in the first place. And so I thought, okay, my priorities are different. I've gotten here. It's not time to cry racism. It's not time to say, okay, I've come all along here and now I'm being discriminated against. Now I'm being attacked. It's not the time to say that. Let's create some active changes out there in society. And then I took it upon myself to do so. But the rumors, they just didn't stop. The hate mails just didn't stop. They went from just being horrible personal messages being sent to me directly to being reproduced on campus rumor mills, to being reproduced on, all of these little anonymous confession pages that universities run. And it was a matter of time before student newspapers started carrying these accusations around. And they said that, okay, Rashmi Samant, the president-elect, is being accused of racism, transphobia, anti-Semitism. This is how they like to, portray it. And I was really confused. I was like, okay, I've never done terrible to anybody. I've never said anything terrible about any community. Historically, we've been so welcoming to Jews. There's no way we'll get, accused of these things. It was just a moment of confusion over and over and over again, and I didn't really know what was going on. And then came a history professor. Mind you, it was even teachers who were getting involved. It was not just a student bickering that was happening. Who put out a post saying, okay, Rashmi Samant, the Hindu president of Oxford University Students' Union, is racist, transphobic, blah, 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 because she comes from coastal Karnataka, which is the hotbed of Hindutva. And here, look at a picture of her parents. So the man had managed to stalk my mother, pick up a photo where she had said, Eki Nara, Jai Shri Ram, a photo frame saying Jai Shri Ram, and that was used as basis to paint me as an extremist and attach all other accusations in a litany that come along. It's so incredulous how these people operate. I was accused of taking money from the Modi government to win the election. And the logic that they had was so funny. They said, okay, if you look closely, she did her undergraduate degrees from Manipal Institute of Technology, and the website there has a picture of the Supreme Leader Narendra Modi. Mind me, it was a time when it was COVID time. or left to it. I'd like to, quote a very, I think, contemporary example we are told when we are in school. The logic is so weak that if you ask them to write an essay on a tree, they're going to write a long and elaborate essay about a horse, and they're going to say that the horse was tied to the tree. And that is the kind of logic that they use to throw accusations, to substantiate them, and to keep reproducing them through popular media to vilify the people they do not like, and to essentially kick them out. It's manifesting as different forms. It's manifesting as the weaponization of the woke culture, of the cancel culture, where suddenly you don't like someone and it's about time to accuse them with everything that's going to make them a social pariah, making it equally, comfortable to persecute them. You might be wondering what went wrong. Okay, here's a girl who spoke her mind out, starting with her campaign, saying she's out there to do decolonization, and she wins. Then what went wrong? Because it was clearly, a clear mandate. I believe that decolonization and words such as feminism, justice, it's only comfortable for Westerners who retain supremacy in all of these institutions as long as it's according to their terms. They would be comfortable if I was that, president of color who won on a platform of decolonization, and her method to, address decolonization was just to host a decolonization week where, you have a whole party where you say, okay, you get 5 people speaking about decolonization, and then it's over. That was their idea of decolonization. My idea of decolonization was to change the syllabus, was to actively have a consultation on where we were going wrong, where we had to reinvent the way we looked at the world, where we had to be more inclusive towards communities which were historically persecuted, and that these narratives fall short of justifying the truth out there. So it was an uncomfortable reality out there, and they could clearly sense that she's not someone who's going to end with hosting a decolonization week or by just being happy, bringing color to the university poster. That was not her idea of accessibility, inclusivity, diversity, or decolonization. It went beyond that. It went beyond to actually having real measures that would really decolonize this place. And then the bastion felt attacked. The people coming at me were the vocal minority, but unfortunately, vocal minority does manage to create more ruckus out there in the world than the silent majority does. They are so good at using, prevalent media houses, and using, selective sort of biases that are institutionally ingrained to favor them. And they're so literally great at getting the word out. And I think that is also part of the problem that we face. The bullying got so bad for me, and the labels were so severe that one of the labels levied against me was that of Islamophobia. And Islamophobia is this kind of a accusation that if you just are accused of it, you'll be persecuted for it. So I started straight up getting horrible death messages saying, okay, you deserve to be removed from campuses and this and that. And mind me, we had a very strong population from that part of the world, from different countries, from 52 different countries. And it had become a reality for me to have to deal with it. So it became a matter of whether I resign and save my life, or whether I continue and risk having all of these things happen to me. I decided that the mature thing was to realize, was to resign but not to give up. I did resign because it got too difficult for me to carry on with the kind of mounting threats I was getting in a country which was not my own, where my parents were not with me, where even my extended family was not around me. I was literally alone and thousands of miles away from home. I did resign, but I did not give up. I was like, okay, but this is an unfair situation. Resigning doesn't mean I give up. I complained to the police, I complained to the community, I complained to everybody who would listen to me, the university, any board that would listen to me, and I kept pushing on. That's when a 21-year-old had her first taste of institutional bias. The whole, bubble that this world is either right or wrong or just or unjust, that broke. I finally realized that justice is also a tool of supremacy, and justice is a matter of convenience out there more than a tool of doing the right thing out there. It was a very rude awakening made me feel uncomfortable in front of my own housemates. They even came to my house when I had categorically told them I'm not there and created a scene with my housemates just to make the victim sweat and take their complaint back to make sure that they don't pursue it further. So this is the kind of intimidatory tactics that come in when you're against an institution, when you're being institutionally persecuted. The university complaints manager who was in charge of investigating the case would go on 6-week leaves, would go on 8-week leaves. There are no emails being sent. And mind me, this was the time when I was still completing my degree. I was still studying very hard in one of the most difficult courses out there, and graduating Oxford is not very easy. We have 2 prime ministers who have dropped out of Oxford and Cambridge because it was too difficult for them to graduate. And I was still pursuing my degree and having to face all of this and the public humiliation and the media onslaught at the same time. And I think it was difficult for me to carry on, but I did somehow. There was some kind of a divine intervention that kept me going. And after weeks and weeks and weeks of pushing and prodding and insisting that okay, something wrong had happened, I got a result from a couple of people. I got an acknowledgement from the university that okay, what happened to you was wrong. We acknowledged that, and that's about it. And there were corrective measures taken against people who were initially against me, including the history professor who had written that horribly racist essay against me. But I think here also comes the role of media, right? The facts might say otherwise, but the story will always be something that they want to be told. Even when I was being touted around as racist, transphobic and anti-Semitic, not one mainstream newspaper reported the fact that there's an Oxford faculty saying Oxford is not ready for a Hindu president. There was not one article really addressing why I was being unfairly targeted. There was not one news article that covered a statement by a British parliamentarian whilst he was filing a motion in my support at the British Parliament. So there is institutional categorical things happening in my favor, but it never managed to, come up in the mainstream media. The fourth thing that happened was it was also discussed in the Indian Parliament, in the Rajya Sabha. Ashwini Vaishnav, Jai Shankar, they have a debate about it, but it's not amplified. You don't see news articles about it coming out there in the mainstream. What you see is a statement devoid of proof, devoid of logic, made by 3 Oxford student societies of the time, Oxford Hindu Society, Indian Society, South Asian Society, which are not even registered to the University of Oxford. So you could literally claim to be the Nagpur Club of Oxford and even make a statement. And they were carried around in mainstream media of the time. And it is incredible how this kind of bias works. Even when a story is being made about what is happening out there in the world. And it feels absolutely crushing to be going through something like this, when you know what your truth is, but no one's ready to say it just because it's uncomfortable. And the minute somebody says, even so otherwise, from a very unverified source, it then becomes headlines. Even when corrective measures were taken, there's I think one article by Republic that says, okay, she's being vindicated and this and that and so on. It is still not carried. I graduated on the 26th of November 2021. It's the same day that the Nobel laureate in peace from Pakistan, Malala Yousafzai, graduated from Oxford too. So we graduated on the same day. We have that in common. And Indian media houses like the NDTV, Mint, Wire decided to cover the fact that she's graduated there after 9 years of what happened to her by the Taliban. And nobody covered the fact that I graduated as well. Somebody who brought in so much pride to the country, who had been the first Indian president of the Union, and so on and so forth. It was categorically not covered. Even today, there are so many lone statements out there, coming even from spokespersons of different political parties who find ideological convenience on one side, saying she's an Oxford dropout. It is so crazy how we live in a world where truth is reduced to nothing but fiction, and stories of the most fictitious kind are touted around as headlines and as the reality, as the alternative reality. Even Godhra riots for that matter. We know that the Supreme Court has given a clean chit to our Honorable Prime Minister. And that is also rather than at points of truth, of reckoning, of true logic and true rooting. And that is the unfortunate times that we live in globally. I think there's young, naive people who are just out there to earn our bread, who are just out there to be through an honest days of work. We don't really associate ourselves so much with it, and we're not even aware of these things as much. I was one such person. I was born in a Hindu family, I was raised Hindu, but it was never an overt part of my identity or anything whatsoever. I was an engineer by training, I was doing my master's in engineering at the University of Oxford. My presidential campaign had nothing to do with my identity, the fact that I was Hindu or not, but it then became part of the popular discourse once I did become the president. It became something that was used to actively persecute me unfairly whatsoever once I did become president. Then that brings the focus on why we as regular people who are not political, who might not be very ideologically active as well, need to take it upon ourselves to dispel these popular stereotypes about our identity. We might not know this, but an attack on our identity has been one of the longest ongoing sort of expeditions this world has seen. And it's not publicly, discussed as much because it's not convenient to do so, and unfairly so. The comparison I want to make here is, why is it important to dispel these narratives? Is it just because you want to look good in society, you want to look as if it's a great identity? No, I don't think it is that. I think that this kind of false rumor mongering, this kind of stereotyping and vilification, which happens without any basis, it then becomes preconditioning to genocide. We've seen what happened with the Jewish people. Initially, it was just rumors against them. It was just horrible things being said against them. It was just them being made the villain of the day, without any logic or whatsoever. And then when the Holocaust started, millions of well-meaning people also looked the other way because somehow they were psychologically conditioned that this is a community that deserves it, they're the villains, and so on and so forth. Similar trends can be observed about how the Hindu Dharma or the Hindu people have been written about historically. And I'd like to quickly delve into why it is the way it is. And this comes after a lot of learning, after having to go through an identity crisis, after having to go through an attack that very much challenged the basis of it. And this was not something I knew already. And I'm very sad that our education system does not equip with these facts, us with these facts. The Bharat was a very prosperous nation, as we know. 10th century is where I'm at. Before the invasion started, before we were looted, subjugated, colonized, before we were broken, 33% of the world's GDP, economic progress, military progress, educational progress, culturally so evolved, out there winning, and then there were multiple attacks to kind of have us subjugated. The sort of occupation that our people have faced, the identity Hindu was a very elaborate one. Even Persian kings named their daughters and queens Hind because it was beautiful. It signified a larger than life, description. It was something very prestigious, something very beautiful, and it was part of the discourse. And the Hindu people were touted around as one of the most successful and beautiful people out there. And there were multiple bouts of attack that happened. What we don't know is the many attacks that happened unsuccessfully, because we only read about the one or two attacks where we were defeated and then occupied, not the countless attacks which we faced fearlessly, which where we sent them back. And it's sad that we need to look into Persian, literature to find proof of this, to find relevance to this. There's a Persian poet called Hali. He writes that even the mighty army of Din Hijazi, who had conquered, lands over the 7 seas, drowned in the face of the Ganga. So he says this about the mind of the Bharatiya people post the Islamic rule. And then they categorically write about how mighty kingdoms can be only crowned crushed by crooked intellectuals and not by force. And this is something their own, historians, their own poets have documented. The first distortion, I believe, that happened was the misappropriation of the word, of the identity of Hindu, which were the people living in Bharat, pre-colonization, pre-occupation, pre-subjugation. If you look at a Persian dictionary called Farang-e-Ami, which is one of the most, primitive dictionaries out there in Persian, it defines Hindu as beauty spot on a beautiful girl's cheek, like a black beauty spot on a beautiful girl's cheek. And then it describes it as the boy who steals the girl's heart, man ko lubhane wala. So something like that. And then you see another Persian dictionary coming, in the more contemporary space called Lugat. And that describes the Hindu as Kala, Kafir and Chor. They picked up the word Chor from Dil ko churane wala. They picked up the word Kala from the black beauty spot on a beautiful girl's cheek. And then Kafir is the typical way of othering. So this is how misinformation, misappropriation, vilification, stereotyping and, rewriting things just to hate on someone and to break them as a people, to then, occupy them, subjugate them, had happened. This was one of the first intellectual wars that happened. We might think that intellectual wars have no real life ramifications, that, it's just ideas, it's just this sort of, maybe an ego contest between different communities. But it's all a race to have marketplace supremacy, to have prosperity, to have rights over resources. They broke us as people just because they were after our resources. And not because, they were after our identity or something. And today we are not mature enough to realize that reclaiming our identity is part of reclaiming the resources, the autonomy, and the right to go after resources in our own will. When Chandrayaan-3 successfully landed, one of the primary, things going around was that, okay, hey, like India is poor, you should be putting that money into solving poverty, or you should be giving us back our aid money. That was the popular narrative that was going away. And this was a way to attack our sense of self-respect. Moon mission is not any kind of a prestige project to say I got here first. It's an attempt to, colonize all of the resources which are on the moon. There are millions of tons of helium on the moon, which will become the future of energy. And whoever gets there first gets to, tax the rest of the world for these resources for the rest of their lives and become rich as a result. So what they're doing to us is breaking our sense of identity, breaking our sense of, self-respect, self-being, to actually go achieve something that we rightfully need, just so that they can retain their supremacy, just so that they can retain their places in the marketplace. So I think it's all interconnected. Nobody would come after us if we didn't have the resources, if we weren't rich, and if we weren't evolved as people. And the attempt to, attack our sense of identity was not some kind of a holy crusade. It was actively to break us as people so that we could be conquered. Because otherwise, we had successively shown that we couldn't be conquered as one people without any fault lines. Today we see fault lines on everything and how the systemic approach has manifested over time. Back then it started with just changing the meaning of a word in the dictionary. And being service-oriented, and being, paropakara, seva. That was the essence of the people that brought them all together, be it Kerala or be it Kashmir. So that was the essence that brought us all together. And today, we find over mundane things that make us different. We are not seeing what's at the core, but we are seeing how different we are from outside. We pick up fights over little words when the meaning is what brings us all together. And this was something that was a result of, conscious efforts over centuries to break us as people. And what happened at Oxford is just a symptom of that problem. It isn't something that happened in isolation. It is not something that just happened to me, let's all hate on her, let's come up with something new to hate on her. It was just a symptom of this sort of a cold, calculated campaign that has gone on for centuries on end. Otherwise, it's not easy to come up with theories one fine day and to stereotype an entire population because, hey, conditioning matters, right? If you say the same things about a person from another community and say, okay, we're not ready for a president from this community or that community, it is taken as racist, classist, and there will be outrage all round on media, social media, internationally, politics. 52 countries might come together to condemn it and to, diplomatically challenge it. But when the same thing is being said about a Hindu, there's no effect. Because conditioning has been so deep, so long, and so relentless that people just don't care. People think it's normal. People think it's fair. People think it's true. And it's interesting to also observe how our own people have internalized this attack on the identity. You would expect that, okay, the whole world might believe terrible things about us, but we still have our own truth with this. But the power of narrative and repeating lies over and over and over again is so strong that it even compels the very native people who've lived the realities of such brutal, situations to accept it as reality. When I resigned and there was outrage for 3 months saying, okay, it's not okay to say that, so it's not ready for interview. There's so much political discourse around it. There was also the Crown Prosecution Services as part of a hate speech complaint looking up at the university, being like, okay, what is going on here? How is this student being treated like this? And do you know how the university solved the situation to get out from a criminal prosecution? They came up with an Indian face to replace me. So somebody with an Indian sounding name, with a Hindu origin, was made president, and they didn't win the election in the first round. They won it in the 11th round, for God's sake. And then that too by like 1 or 2 votes. Where was my crushing victory and where was this just passed by? And they say today that, okay, racism exists at Oxford, but that's not what happened to Rashmi because I'm Hindu and I'm here and that's proof enough that there's nothing wrong happened to her. So our own people are, willing to sacrifice their own self-respect, their sense of community, to sacrifice the sense of justice that their community deserves, just to pick up a piece of meat being thrown away by their former masters. And mind me, the student was not even Indian, they were American, and they've been there all their life. And they had nothing to do with, the current socio-economic situations of the Bharatiya culture. And they were just appropriating that just to get a few points and to, bring in that flair on the table. It is insidious how at the end of everything sinister, you will find one person from our own community willing to attest and to say that it's okay that we are being abused, that we are being stereotyped and that we deserve it. There are still people from our ancestry who are willing to forget the blood, sweat and tears our own ancestors put in to make this civilization possible, just so that they can have a few brownie points and pander to this Western, to this colonized mindset. Because we might have been independent maybe for a very long time now, for over 75 years now, but it is the slave mentality that they left us with, not the physical chains. And that is something that's been taking far too long for us as a population, as a community to let go of. And on that note, I'd like to end my monologue on a Hindu in Oxford. I hope that you give it a read to understand maybe the nicer nuances of how our world is placed, why these symptoms come up, so that maybe somebody in your circles, if they go through like this, you know what to tell them, and you know to tell them to fight back, to seek justice, and how they can do it. Probably so much better than I did. I also wrote this story because I recognize the fact that no one's going to write this for me. And even if they write it for me, they're going to conveniently leave out things and define it as they did, Kala, Kafir and Chor, right? They're going to leave out the context, they're going to leave out the beautiful phrases, and they're going to just pick up what's convenient for them and spin their own story. So it's just up to us really to reclaim, to re-establish what we are all about, and to take charge really of that reality, and to stop this vicious attack from happening over and over again in the future. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rashmi ji. As she rightly said, the forces cannot take over Bharat, only crooked ideologies can. And there are many students sitting over here, like me, who wanted to go abroad and pursue our higher education. But it's that reality which we needed to go through before going there. So it's the expectation versus the reality description which we went through right now. Now I invite Satish ji Sarda, Tejinder Singh Renu ji, Shruti ji Gandhi, and Hemant ji Lodha to kindly come on the stage for the launch of this book. I'm sure you all are ready with the questions. Our volunteers will be there with the mic. Make sure you raise your hands so that they can see you and you're visible to them. And then also you'll start with a question by introducing yourself first, followed by a question, and please keep your question short, to the point, and not your thoughts, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi Rashmi. I am Shriji from University of Warwick. So I had one question. So in University of Warwick, there have been incidents or events like anti-Sikh violence in 1984. It was shown that it was perpetrated by India, when we all know that it was by Congress, and events like Modi's documentary by SFI, Student Federation of India. So my question is there any some community or any group that that resonates our voice, and is there any possibility of forming any such group? And another subsequent question is that, so we know you, you are a public figure, you a large community of people knows you. So there are other public figures as well. So if you all come up together, would that then big sphere feel that will be sufficient to raise our voice against this left ecosystem?
Well, thank you so much for that question. You can take a seat. And I do believe that when things like these do happen, it's essential to make your feelings, visible. The left so-called ecosystem, they are a minority, but they know how to propagate it. If they have an idea, even if they're the only person in a lunch club of 10 people, they will go and tell their statement. They will go out there, make their views known, and they will pretend they have the right to do so. We hesitate, and our hesitation is seen as a point of weakness. When I was being attacked, I was just told, okay, just stay low, just wait for this to blow over, go back, finish your degree, be the good girl. But I believe that had I done that, the attacks would have never stopped. They would have never stopped. They would have, haunted me for the rest of my life. They would have come after me when, I have a job or anything, written to them saying, okay, she was accused of this, take her off, kick her out, kick her out. They would keep doing that. So the only way to survive these positions is to fight back, is to make your opinion known. And when you do that, you develop a sense of formidability even to them. Even today, the University of Oxford are truly scared of me and what I'm capable of. And they respect me for fighting back. Had I gone back, they would have just pushed me off to the oblivion, not just to scare me, but to make an example of me for the rest of the community to follow. So I really believe that you need to speak up. Even if you're one person, it's okay. Your voice does matter. And what they have, really shown is that it's the voice of the minority that can also create popular narratives. So it's all a matter of whether you're willing to speak or not. Secondly, I do believe that there are some wonderful, organizations in the UK that you can be a part of. There's the NHSF, the National Hindu Students Forum. There's Insight, and there are a few communities, INSA as well, which are doing good work around bringing together Bharatiya students who take a lot of pride in being Bharatiya and have a sense of identity rooted in it. Lastly, I think you asked about the community coming together, right? I think the community is coming together, but I think it's unfair to discount the trauma that we've faced as well after being subjugated, colonized, and literally made to suffer for so long. The first generation post-colonization, which is probably my grandfather's generation, was invested in putting food at the table because we were left in a begging boat. It was all a matter of do we have a meal by the end of the day. So they were invested in actually creating that sense of security. The second generation which came after, which is my father's generation, they didn't have to worry so much about putting food on the table, but they had to build a house, get a job, bring stability, make sure that the family had social security. I believe that it's up to our generation now because we don't have to worry about where our food is coming from. We have a roof on our heads to begin with. We have a decent education to begin with as well. And we have the liberty, we have the privilege rather, to talk about these things. And I truly believe that generations before us didn't have that kind of a privilege because we were still recovering from centuries of loot, subjugation, colonization and whatnot. So I truly believe that it's up to us now. And a system takes a while to form. We are talking about over 1,000 years of what happened. And to undo it, mere 10 years or 20 years is not going to suffice. It's going to take decades long of effort. It's going to require consistency. And it's going to also require you to go through phases where you don't see results in the initial phase, but you do see it later on. So I think it requires for you to be that recklessly positive about there being change and there being a change in narrative as well. So we need more people willing to fight the uphill battle and not the easy one.
रश्मि जी, अभी यूके के जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर है वो एक हिंदू है, उनकी पत्नी भी हिंदू है। तो आपको क्या लगता है कि उनके साथ भी ऐसा सब हो रहा होगा या हुआ होगा? और दूसरी एक चीज़ है कि जो आपके साथ हुआ वो कुछ ऑक्सफोर्ड या कुछ ऐसी यूनिवर्सिटी से वहीं तक के लिमिटेड था कि पूरे यूके में आपको ऐसा लगता है कि ऐसा कुछ है? क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ भी, हमारे देश में भी अगर हम देखेंगे तो कुछ यूनिवर्सिटीज़ है जहाँ पे ऐसा लगेगा कि नहीं ये देश में ऐसा नहीं है, क्योंकि बाकी पूरे देश में ऐसा माहौल नहीं है। तो ऐसा कुछ है कि क्या?
तो थैंक यू फॉर द क्वेश्चन। जब ऋषि सुनक जी खड़े हुए थे फॉर द पोजीशन ऑफ द पार्टी लीडरशिप, तो उन्होंने चुनाव अपने एमपीज के बीच में, पार्टी के एमपीज के बीच में लड़ा था और उन्होंने लिस्ट ट्रस्ट के खिलाफ वो फाइनल प्रीमियरशिप आई थी। क्रेडेंशियली वो तो उनसे बेहतर थे लिस्ट ट्रस्ट से, फिर भी उन्होंने उनको नहीं चुना, ऋषि को नहीं चुना। एंड दैट इज फैक्ट इनफ टू शो कि रेसिज्म कहाँ तक जाती है। और उस समय में अगर आप सोशल मीडिया देखते तो आपको दिखता है कि उनकी जो गौ पूजा उन्होंने और उनकी पत्नी ने किया था दीपावली के अवसर पे, उसका भी मजाक उड़ाया गया था कि इकोनॉमी इतनी डिप्रेशन में चली गई उनके रॉन्ग पॉलिसीज के कारण कि they were compelled to pick him to save them basically, despite hating him. अभी जब वे कैम्ब्रिज में गए थे, उन्होंने एक भाषण दिया था कि मैं यहाँ प्रधानमंत्री, ब्रिटेन के प्रधानमंत्री के तौर पे नहीं, बट एक प्राउड हिंदू के तौर पे आया हूँ, और रामचरितमानस की जो कथा चल रही थी वहाँ पे उसमें वो गए थे। तब भी उसके बिल्कुल अगले दिन एक आर्टिकल आया है क्रिटिक में, जो कि वहाँ की एक मैगजीन है, जिन्होंने मुझे भी उनसे जोड़ा था, और उन्होंने कहा था कि पीपल लाइक रश्मि एंड ऋषि, they are furthering the cause of the Indian government and Prime Minister Modi here. So it is so easy for them to discount something just because we all identify with one identity. उन्होंने पहले मोदी जी को फैशिस्ट बनाया बिना एनी प्रूफ के, फिर हम सबको उनसे जोड़ा और फिर कहा देखो ये सारे फैशिस्ट हैं, they don't deserve where they are. तो ये तो रहेगा, और अब जब इलेक्शन आएगी 24 में, उनका भी इलेक्शन है, और पहली बार ऋषि जी पूरे देश के सामने चुनाव के लिए खड़े होंगे, तो आई थिंक देखा जाएगा कि इनकी कितनी जो हेट ट्रेंड है वो बाहर आएगी, या वो लोग अपने कैसे देखेंगे, क्योंकि उनकी इकोनॉमी तो काफ़ी बैड शेप में है. ही इज द ओनली पर्सन हु कैन सेव देम ऑल विद हिज policies which have been good for them. So it depends on what they will choose, whether they have pride and that undying ego, or to save themselves.
G20 में भी आया तो उन्होंने बहुत गर्व के साथ कहा कि मैं,
तो उनका तो हमें अभिनंदन करना चाहिए, क्योंकि despite all the attacks, he is still sticking on to his identity.
Hi, Ashish this way. My question is not related to, I don't know, it's a political question. A lot of young generation goes for the better education or maybe for the better lifestyle in the foreign countries. But recently the data showed that it's the highest ever people have surrendered their citizenship of Indian citizenship. As per Indian citizenship rule, you have to follow only, you can have only one citizenship. So my question is that what is your opinion on this? Is it advantage or disadvantage to the maybe Bharat or India?
Well, thank you so much for the question. You take a seat. I do believe that there has been a conditioning by the West to take the cream away from Bharat, to drain it of its brain so that we don't really re-establish ourselves post-colonization. And the entire attempt to do so was to create a global supremacist idea that life there is hunky and dory. They created a university ranking system which literally puts the universities in top 10, because the conditions are so that it is very conducive to what they have and what others don't have. If you look at the criteria, you will look like it is a rigged one, because the criteria is clearly favoring them. And also I think it's also popular culture, right? In Bharat, it is shown that there is so much crime. When the Nirbhaya case happened, it was put around and then it was used to paint Delhi as the real capital of the world. But let me tell you, when I was living in London, girls would go missing every other day, and they would be found at the bottom of the Thames, and it would be written off as some kind of a hate crime against women, and it wouldn't be publicized for what it really is. When I lived there during my brief work period with the British Parliament, I would always, when walking back from the metro station to my house, which is just 500 meters, I would keep my keys in between my hands just to poke it in someone's eye if somebody tries to stab me or take me by force. And that is the reality of places like that. But unfortunately, the conditioning is such that people choose to live here thinking that there's better heaven to be found there. And the people here are conditioned to believe that people who come back have somehow failed in that quest of their dream. So I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of people who study abroad and come back are looked down upon. And it is something I face every day. My choice for coming back to Bharat is taken as some kind of a compulsion because something didn't work out there for me, while things had clearly worked out for me there. So I think it is double conditioning that happens. Initially there's enough conditioning to build a dream that there's a better life out there. And then once people live there, there's a whole trap that you can't go back now, because people back home are going to make fun of you for it. But if you ask anybody living there, they're just tired of the monotonous life that they're living, and they wish that they were in India every single day. But I think there's this double psychological conditioning that will forever stop them from coming back. And the citizenships that you talked about that were given up, I think it's been a process of a very long time, right? People get granted citizenship only after they live in a particular country for 10, 15 odd years. So I think it's also a legacy of something of a political legacy that goes back a decade, and it is not very, immediate. We might see the statistics coming out now that this year they gave it up, but they've been conditioned for the past 20, 15 years to be on that path. And for them to start on that path, the political conditions of this country at that time might have been the precursor. Yeah.
I'm already introduced you. I'm Chetan. Just one, my first question is, after you became the first Indian, the president of Oxford, the Students' Union, the left ecosystem sort of decoded your background. They followed you, talked with your family, years of your family. Had they traced and found out that you do not belong to the spiritual inclination, your spiritual inclination is not towards what their agenda does not fall into. Had you been somebody from a background of a Jadavpur or a JNU or an amnesty, would they have treated you differently? Is my first question. And second is, in a sense, this left ecosystem, whatever little knowledge that I have of the ecosystem, is it one way or the other the puppet of the red dragon?
Well, that's an interesting question. So thank you so much. Please do sit down. It's my personal opinion, and I don't have data to prove this, that really if I were not who I was and didn't have the particular identity that I had, then I wouldn't be subjected to the kind of vicious attack that I did. Because you see presidents before me and presidents after me with some very shady backgrounds, and that was never brought into question because of the views that they held politically and ideologically. So it only becomes convenient only when you want to kick somebody out, and somebody, you're either one of us or you're not. So it's basically a matter of that. So you either agree or you're not one of them. So you clearly cancelled, you're clearly kicked out just because you have a separate opinion. And I think that is quite a concern that I really have. The second question I didn't follow was about
This entire left ecosystem, is it somewhere?
puppet of the red lion. Well, I don't know if it is a puppet of something or the other, but I know this much that they are very much united in their cause and in their operating procedure. What I see in the left at Oxford is what I see of the left, local left in Udupi as well. The way they operate, the way they condition, the way they have their operations, and how the news kind of flows down. So I see that kind of a compliance, that kind of a alliance between them. And you never see this with the global conservatives because they all have separate agendas. We saw that fail colossally when the Chandrayaan landed, and you saw conservatives in the UK who had to say good things, say horrible things, and they failed the whole idea that the conservatives could all be united globally. So I think it's very concerning that way, and that of course there needs to be a uniting force, otherwise there's no way everybody is saying the same thing up and down, left and right, and there's somewhere the money is coming from. And more often than not, following the money actually leads you to who the real puppeteers are.
Actually, the brutality, the assault, and the ecosystem does have some agenda against China, but there is no protest by them. The ecosystem never protests against China. We never see an agenda of protest against China.
Well, it's interesting because the University of Oxford, which claims to be the temple of free speech and everything, it absolutely shut down a protest by Hong Kong students who were actually trying to protest the whole China situation. And the entire protest was like, I don't know if it was the university officials or who, but it was dissipated so quickly that nobody saw it coming or going. But about India, you can go on and on and on about without facts, without logic, or without any backing and whatever, and then still get center stage, left, right, and center. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
सबसे पहले तो मैं आपके करेज की सराहना करता हूँ, ठीक है? मेरे को एक कहना था कि आप इंडियन एम्बेसी या बाकी जो बड़े बड़े लोग हैं उनसे आप मुझे नहीं कह रहे आपके ऊपर ही अटैक होना था। और दूसरा एक है कि इन्फिनिटी फाउंडेशन करके मिस्टर राजीव मल्होत्रा करके वो करीबन 10 साल से बहुत ही कर रहे हैं। मैं सबको बोलूँगा कि आप जब कंप्यूटर पे जाओगे तो यूट्यूब पे इन्फिनिटी फाउंडेशन राजीव मल्होत्रा ये आप जरूर देखना। आप में थोड़ा सा लगेगा कि मैं कोई तो भी काम कर रहा है सर। थैंक यू। अच्छा, दूसरा क्या था, अभी आप क्या कर रहे हैं?
अच्छा,
सर्विस वगैरह या कुछ कर रही है?
यस,
तो आपके लिए गुड विशेष हम सबकी तरफ से।
थैंक यू सो मच। तो आपका प्रश्न था एम्बेसी को लेकर। तो अभी जो ब्रिटिश हाई कमिश्नर फ्रॉम इंडिया है, इंडियन हाई कमिश्नर जो ब्रिटेन है, वो बहुत ही डीकोलोनाइज्ड किस्म के विवेक गोयस्वामी, उन्होंने बहुत स्टेटमेंट्स भी दिए हैं प्रो भारत। बट आई थिंक वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि हमारा पूरा सिस्टम ऐसा है नहीं, क्योंकि सिस्टम अभी भी बदल ही रहा है। हमारे सिस्टम में अभी भी वो लोग हैं, दरबारी लोग, जो पुराने सिस्टम के क्या कहते हैं आदीन हैं। जब मेरा केस चल रहा था तो ऐसी कोई थी जो हाई कमिश्नर थी, और तब मेरे लिए एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स मिनिस्टर जयशंकर जी का स्टेटमेंट लाना आसान था। उन्होंने स्टेटमेंट मेरे क्या कहते हैं पक्ष में दिया था, पर एक हाई कमिश्नर ने मेरी ईमेल का रिस्पॉन्स नहीं दिया था। और हम इस मामले के ना देश को नहीं खोज सकते हैं, क्योंकि ये सिस्टम जो है ना, हमें सीखना चाहिए कि द सिस्टम इज अ वेरी कॉम्प्लेक्स प्लेस, and just because things are not going the way they should for you, that doesn't mean that the people at the top are responsible for it. सिस्टम को बदलने में भी टाइम लगता है, और कभी-कभी थोड़ा सह लेना पड़ता है एंड थोड़ा बिगर पिक्चर देखना पड़ता है। यू ऑलवेज सी ना कि अगर आपका ग्लास हाफ फुल है या हाफ एम्प्टी। मुझे इतना सपोर्ट और इतना प्यार मिला ना बाकी लोगों से कि कुछ चीज़ें जो मिसिंग थी ना, वो मायने ही नहीं पड़ा। तो मैंने आई ऑलवेज चोज टू लुक एट माई सिचुएशन एज अ ग्लास half full and not as half empty. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, okay, what do I do now? So after graduating from the University of Oxford in 2021, I worked at the British Parliament as one of the advisors there. And वो मैंने इसीलिए किया क्योंकि उन्होंने मुझे चुनौती डाला था कि आप कभी कहीं पे नौकरी नहीं कर पाओगे वेस्ट में, क्योंकि हम आपका करियर बर्बाद कर देंगे, हम सबको लिख देंगे कि आप ऐसे हैं ऐसे हैं ऐसे हैं, तो आप भाग जाओगे यहाँ से। तो इसीलिए मैंने वो नौकरी लिया था, क्योंकि वो सबसे ज़्यादा उसकी बैकग्राउंड चेक होती है। तो अगर उन्होंने रिजेक्ट कर दिया, मतलब वो किसी को भी रिजेक्ट कर सकते हैं, वैसे उनकी स्ट्रिंजेंट है, पर अगर उन्होंने एक्सेप्ट कर दिया तो कोई भी एक्सेप्ट कर लेगा लिस्ट में। सो इट्स एन एक्सेप्टेड स्टैंडर्ड। तो मैंने बस उनको दिखाने के लिए वो एक शॉर्ट टर्म कॉन्ट्रैक्ट लिया था। अब मैं भारत में हूँ और भारत में मैं अपना उद्योग चलाती हूँ। तो दैट्स बेसिकली मोर अबाउट इट। एनी अदर क्वेश्चंस?
मैं थोड़ा लेट आया हूँ, आगे आपके साथ क्या स्ट्रगल हुआ ये मेरे को नहीं मालूम है। मैं जस्ट अभी मैंने एक आर्टिकल पढ़ा था, तो आपसे जानना चाहता हूँ कि वेस्टर्न कल्चर में वहाँ के जो यंग्स है, जो क्रिश्चियन है, वो धीरे धीरे अपना रिलीजन छोड़ रहे हैं, ऐसा कुछ है वास्तविकता? क्योंकि एक्स मुस्लिम भी अभी धीरे धीरे बढ़ रहा है, लेकिन एक्स मुस्लिम सामने वो प्रोजेक्ट नहीं करते क्योंकि उसको खतरा है। क्योंकि एक्स मुस्लिम बोले तो हमको सबको मालूम है कि यहाँ संतन से जुदा वाली बात हो जाती है, लेकिन जो क्रिश्चियनिटी में ऐसा हो रहा है, तो ये वास्तविकता आपने वहाँ देखी होगी, तो फैक्ट क्या है?
Well, thank you sir for that question. Definitely, young लोगों में वो जो एक्टिव प्रैक्टिसिंग है कि आप चर्च जाओ, आप मासेस में जाओ, ये तो कम हो चुका है और लोग अपने आप को एथीस्ट कहना पसंद करते हैं। बट कल्चरली वो स्टिल अभी भी एब्राहमिक है, वो अभी भी उसी वैल्यूज में कोर तरीके से बिलीव करते हैं, इन द वे दे सी ग्लोबल मार्केट स्पेसेस, इन द वे दे सी अदर कम्युनिटीज। तो उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, क्योंकि उनको अपने कल्चर या उसकी लेगेसी पे कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं है। इट्स जस्ट दैट दे इन द नेम ऑफ मॉडर्निटी दैट दे डोंट प्रैक्टिस इट as effectively as they do, but the core essence is still there, and that core essence is what I think ultimately becomes very detrimental. The people still do believe that Christianity has done wonderful things and that you can't speak anything against it, and the essential sense that polytheistic faiths are somewhere or the other at fault, and that they're backward and so on and so forth, which comes from that essence. तो वो essence है, तो जब तक वो essence है ना, आप कुछ भी करो, अगर वो संडे मास में भी ना जाए तो, या फिर अपने आप को एथीस्ट भी कहें ना, उससे वो फर्क नहीं पड़ता। तो I think that is the one aspect that I did observe. Whereas for us, you will find Hindus who wear tika, who wear bindi, who go to a temple, but ideologically they're so far away from the dharma, who will refuse to speak up straight up when somebody attacks them. अभी आप तमिलनाडु में ही देखो कैसे उदयनिधि स्टालिन ने वो स्टेटमेंट दिया, Westerners. So that is, I think, more or less the difference between there and here. यहाँ तो आप अपने बच्चों को हिंदू लिखने में भी मजबूर कर सकते हो, उनके हाथ में धागा भी बांध सकते हो और उनको मंदिर भी ले जा सकते हो, पर इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि वो एसेंस बचा है. वो एसेंस, वो जो आइडेंटिटिकल एसेंस है, वो नहीं रहा, and that is problematic. Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, first of all, for this wonderful session. Myself, Swaraj, I am from Ferguson College. I am a law student. So, my question is, अभी मैं देख रहा हूँ एक पॉजिटिव शिफ्ट हो रहा है, पैराडाइम शिफ्ट हो रहा है, लोग अपने कल्चर की तरफ आ रहे हैं. तो जब कोई पैराडाइम शिफ्ट होता है तो उसका विरोध भी बहुत ज़्यादा होता है. So, is there any tips you can give to Indian students कि कैसे ये जो विरोध होगा आगे जाके तो उसे कैसे हम काउंटर करें? So कुछ है as a blueprint for the students?
Well, thank you so much for the question. I think basic law of inertia होता है ना, when you try to change something the way it's been done for a very long time, तो resistance तो होगा ही. So that resistance is something that needs to be faced. And as a blueprint, I think that's the reason I wrote this book. कि जब मेरे साथ विरोध हुआ था तो हमने कैसे इसको face किया. We've priced it extremely low. We are giving away all author proceeds away in charity. So this is basically क्या कहते हैं, social message वैसे वाला book. It's not something that's a commercial project at all. So I would encourage people to actually read and really understand the nuances of how attacks happen and how you face them. And maybe read more, texts like these. Hindu Rocks were the Snakes in Ganga by Rajiv Malhotra. These are all such great texts, which underline these things and which give you real life insight into how these things operate and how you can fight it. I would encourage young people to read more and to watch less reels to have that insight.
I'm Agneva from Samant. I'm also a law student. So my question for you was, what is your opinion on Wokiesm is being used as a geopolitical tool by the West to influence and create uniformity towards their ideals?
Well, I have very, very strong feelings about it, and I think woke culture inadvertently does become a part of this thing. The West has unfortunately hijacked every, movement out there, from feminism to, from environmentalism to everything. Everything is hijacked to make sure that they remain in the supreme power. And the woke movement is nevertheless one such thing. I think what the Indian people can really say is that we don't need it because we've always been aware. Woke is literally slang for aware in the AF culture. So what we can say is, okay, you're saying we need to smash glass, be angry about environment, but hey, we are a culture that worships nature, which has always lived in congruence, which has never taken more than it needs. It is you people who, the Westerners, in fact, who industrialized, who mind the nature. We are not one of those. So I think it's important to dispel the sort of imposition of this woke culture on us by presenting a counter narrative. They bring in the pride movement to say that the third gender and the other genders were, historically subjugated. But we can say that in Indian mythology it's not the case. So maybe it's the case in your society, but it's not here. So that movement doesn't make a lot of sense here. So we need to actively combat it and to make sure that we don't remain, at the receiving end of manufactured outrages out there. Because it's clearly a way to, create uniformity, as you put it, so that they know how to keep their supremacist position intact. When they know that these movements can be leveraged to cause civil commotion, unrest, like it was in some parts of the US as well, during the BLM movement, to portray a certain political picture. Though it started off as a very genuine movement, as an outrage to the death of the killing of George Floyd. So I think we see this hijacking happening over and over, and it's necessary for us to critically think as young people, to question everything that's being told to us, which is being given to us, which is being packaged to us, and to have this real sense of understanding whether we need it or not, or if it's just another Western fad which is out there to keep that trend of colonization on and on. I think we very often mistake westernization and modernity, that it's colonization for westernization and modernity. we think that okay, it's modern to do so and it's Western to do so. It's not. It's colonial to do so, and that understanding needs to come. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Toshita. I am a student of psychology. So my question was that I have a friend in the US who had told me about to keep if you have to go to study abroad, keep your social media clean. Don't share things which are political. So because they have a practice of going through your social media and stuff. And so, how does it, I mean, there is a struggle here with identifying yourself as a Hindu, idealistically and also culturally, and how does this interfere with the daily routine of us people? And just one more thing. So we might think that for a good education that is portrayed, that the Western universities give us. So in order to go there to get a good education, to be a good student and lead a life in a good way that we might not get here. So how does that actually interfere?
Well, thank you for that question. I truly do empathize with you because I do believe that a lot of young people are told to keep their social media clean. Well, my social media was only filled with travel photos, okay? It was nothing political, there was nothing political. But if they want to remove you from a place and you start speaking out for what's right, they will find ways to persecute you. So even if you're being, all right, you're just playing by their rules, if they want you out, they will have you out. So the only way I think is to be very assertive, because all these, rumors and all these theories are something that they actively push to keep a community silent. And they don't really act on it as much as they think. So barking dogs seldom bite, and I think that is the sentiment that you need to have. And you need to be open about the wonderful, opportunities that will open up in that place if that does become the case. Secondly, I do believe that going abroad should be seen as a point of exposure, not as a point of ultimate salvation and stuff like that. I believe that going to Oxford was a great aspect for me because I could clearly see how ugly the world is and how really the world works. And I'm in a better position to deal with it, be it in Bharat or abroad, and take on these kinds of theories. And that exposure is important. So do go there, but I think it's always essential to see that society also very methodically. Right now, people are getting paid better for jobs here in India than abroad. In the UK, the job for the pay for every graduate because of their bankruptcy situation has actually come to minimum pay. And people who study there just stay back there because they don't want to be humiliated by their family back home that padhai karke wapas aa gaya ghar pe. But you can actually get paid better here. So make yourself more aware of opportunities which are currently budding in this new Bharat, and make those choices very boldly. Don't fall into this whole trap that did exist a couple of decades ago that, okay, the best life was abroad. Because maybe it was a reality under those government and under those circumstances, but it's no longer so. I mean, you have universities here paying master students from different universities. A good 2-3 lakhs for just teaching, something or the other. So that's literally more than the minimum pay that people are getting in London right now because of their economic situation. So make careful situations, careful decisions, and don't fall into this whole trap and this whole hole that you can't get out of later. Because once you initiate it, then it just becomes a whole trap and you think this, so you need to do this and that and that. So have that open mindset to things. There was nobody who could tell me these things, because it's also kept from people. I wasn't told that, okay, these are the opportunities now here in Bharat. But I think now with social media, it's more accessible. Do look into it as a matter of fact. One more question.
Let's do this.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you so much for being so engaging. Yeah, and I'll be here after.
You can come Chindi here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the audience for all the enthusiastic questions, and also you for answering the questions patiently and in a detailed way. I, Nadeem Surabarkar, on behalf of Team Manthan, extend my heartfelt gratitude to Rashmi Samant. After this talk, I would define Rashmi as an exemplar of resilience and courage, who faced racial abuse, discrimination, and intolerance with unwavering determination after winning the presidential elections at Oxford University, resigning and continuing and graduating from Oxford. Today, you have inspired us all with your remarkable journey and showed us the life of a Hindu in Oxford. Also, how even after more than 75 years of independence, colonial mindsets still exist in the West. We at Manthan salute Rashmi ji for being an ambassador of resilience. By sharing your experience, you have not only enriched us, but also sparked vital conversations among us. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to thank the incredible audience and the press. Your enthusiasm and coverage helps us a lot.